Richard the Film Geek here, and I'm here to give you guys my special Christmas 2025 Disasterpiece review. Well, technically more of another re-review of the 2011 made-for-TV film adaptation of the beloved 1952 Mary Norton children's classic, The Borrowers, which was originally broadcast here in the UK on BBC One as part of the Christmas schedules on Boxing Day 2011, was written by Ben Vanstone, who also wrote episodes of EastEnders and Merlin, was directed by Tom Harper, who gave us several episodes of Misfits and Peaky Blinders, as well as Woman in Black, Angel of Death, Wild Rose with Jessie Buckley, and the upcoming Peaky Blinders movie that is due out next year, and stars the Ninth Doctor himself, Christopher Eccleston, National Treasure Stephen Fry, Sharon Horgan, Aisling Loftus, Victoria Wood, Charlie Hiscock, and Robert Sheehan. Purely for the sake of informing those who are still somehow not familiar with the story of The Borrowers, never read the original books, and or even seen any of the other three TV and film adaptations, namely the classic 90s BBC TV adaptation with Ian Holm, the 2009 Studio Ghibli anime adaptation simply titled Arrietty, and or especially my personal favourite being the 1997 live-action film adaptation with Jim Broadbent, John Goodman, and even a little Tom Felton before he was Draco Malfoy. No, really. The story of The Borrowers takes place in modern-day England, which in the case of this particular adaptation, for example, would be 2011 England. And we basically follow the adventures of the 4-inch-high Clock family, consisting of father/patriarch Pod, played by Christopher Eccleston, Mother Homily, played by Sharon Horgan, and their rebellious yet feisty and courageous teenage daughter, Arrietty, played by Aisling Loftus, who live under the floorboards of a very nice London house and constantly borrow, as opposed to steal, debatably, household items in order to survive in the big bad world, as well as avoid being seen, caught, and or squished by so-called human beings. Aboard Arrietty defies her father's overprotective wishes one night and ventures out to explore the house. And along the way, she ends up striking an unlikely but sweet friendship with a lonely but kind-hearted young bean named James, played by Charlie Hiscock. However, this inadvertently leads to the Clocks being forced to leave the house after being spotted by James's cantankerous yet eccentric grandmother Driver, played by Victoria Wood, as well as eventually the main bad guy in this version, namely an obsessive academic university professor named Mildai, played by Stephen Fry, who is determined to prove his theory to the world about the existence of so-called Homo sapiens redactus, and thus grabs the opportunity to expose them to the world's media by kidnapping Pod and Homily. So it is up to Arrietty and a roguish fellow borrower named Spiller, played by Robert Sheehan, to put a stop to Mild Eye's plan without risking being seen themselves, and save her family from his clutches. Now, before I get to the actual review, I just want to preface to you guys that the reason why I've decided to revisit this particular adaptation of The Borrowers in this video for the first time in over a decade is kind of twofold, really. One, it technically counts as a Christmas movie, primarily due to both the setting and naturally the circumstances of when it originally aired on TV. And two, because my old review admittedly kind of sucked. Too many unscripted pauses and or stutterings, less real judging the film on its own merits as an adaptation, and more unfair and unnecessary comparisons to the 1997 film, and worst of all, no overall rating at the end. So I just decided the review badly needed to be redone, and that of course involved having to completely take down the old video, instead of mark it as unlisted or no longer public, like I did with my old review for Mr. Magoo, for example. So, with all that quickly being established and explained away, and now that I've recently rewatched this one for really technically both the third overall time and the first time in way over a decade at this point, like I mentioned earlier, here are my thoughts on The Borrowers 2011. Let's just say that revisiting this one right as we're getting closer to the end of 2025 has actually turned out to be one heck of a blessing in disguise, because oh boy has my opinions on it now drastically changed and declined from how they were back in early 2015 when I did that old review. This thing is pretty bad, and I mean really pretty bad. Like, pretty much almost on the same level as Cleaner, Mr. Magoo, and War of the Worlds combined. In fact, not only does this rank for me alongside those three pieces of shit among the worst movies I've seen this year, but very much like War of the Worlds, but at the same time, perhaps to a remotely lesser degree, this is kind of by far the worst adaptation of this source material that I've seen so far. In fact, as much as I really tried this time around, I still really strongly hesitate to call this a proper adaptation of the original books, because it sure as hell doesn't feel like one. It instead feels more like a cheap, inferior, soulless, charmless, less interesting, and even less fun remake of the 1997 film. And that's exactly my biggest overwhelming problem with this. It falls into the exact same trap that most of the Disney live-action remakes these days fall into, where they take this wonderfully rich, charming, and fantastic source material, completely suck all the fun, colour, vibrancy, emotion, charm, wit, humour, and sophistication out of it, change things that don't necessarily need to be changed in the first place, and or add random stuff that feels really tacked on and don't make an awful lick of sense whatsoever, and instead attempt to make it more grounded and realistic, which on the one hand I do understand to a certain extent was exactly what they were trying to go for here. But ultimately, on the other hand, it comes across as being depressingly grounded and realistic, purely just for the sake of being depressingly grounded and realistic. And don't get me wrong, as much as I absolutely love this version, and always have since my childhood, I will concede that it isn't exactly a faithful adaptation either. But unlike this one that I'm talking about to you guys right now, at least this one that you can see right here does such a brilliant job of retaining the light-hearted tone, fun, sophistication, and charm of the original books, whilst at the same time not being afraid to go into slightly darker and scarier territory, especially during the scenes where John Goodman shows up as the bad guy. The acting on the whole is generally not really that good. Everyone involved here is either horribly miscast in their roles, going through the motions, or literally do jack shit. Christopher Eccleston, he did have potential at least to put his own northern spin on the Podclock character, whilst retaining the same overprotectiveness, lovability, and just fun personality perfectly encapsulated by Ian Holm and Jim Broadbent in their respective performances. But honestly, it felt like he was playing the Doctor all over again, perhaps laced in with a bit of Luke Skywalker from The Last Jedi, which is a crushingly disappointing waste of Eccleston's talents. Sharon Horgan as Homily doesn't really get much of a chance to do anything here other than just to look quirky and pretty. Victoria Wood, God rest her soul, and especially Sean Dooley, who plays James's workaholic, sort of deadbeat dad, also frankly do jack shit in this movie, despite their best efforts. I actually do still kind of remotely like Charlie Hiscock as young James. I thought he was quite legitimately cute in the role, and I guess his friendship with Arrietty was kind of sweet, even though at the same time, unlike Bradley Pierce's Pete in the 97 film, his character doesn't really have as much individual personality to him, other than just the blandly stereotypical cute kid with a geeky bowl cut. Speaking of bland and having no real individual personality to his character, that's honestly the only way I can describe Robert Sheehan's performance as Spiller. Not to mention the fact as well that his character is very much a James Dean or Han Solo type, minus the likability, swagger and charm. Plus his chemistry, or rather lack thereof, with Aisling Loftus is both just as emotionally interesting as a piece of toilet paper, and just as riveting or investing as that between Robert Pattinson, Kristen Stewart, and Taylor Lautner in the Twilight films. While I'm actually on the subject of Aisling Loftus as Arrietty, really bless her for trying with this role, but for me, there is still no denying that this is just one of the most egregiously cheap, piss-poor, misguided, and laziest miscasts for any character I have ever seen. Nor does it help, obviously, that she is clearly a bit too old for this role. You really needed to cast either a relative unknown, or at least someone a bit younger for this character, like, I don't know, a pre-Star Wars Daisy Ridley, for instance. Once again, not Aisling's fault, rather it's squarely on whoever the hell was the casting director for this movie. That dude or gal is the one that should have immediately been fired on the spot for this. As for Stephen Fry, he does get the opportunity to chew as much scenery as he can, but I'm so sorry. Even he cannot save this movie. Nor, frankly, for that matter, does he even hold a candle to the more delightfully bonkers, over-the-top, entertaining and scary performance that John Goodman gave in the 97 film. I mean, honestly, Fry's performance here as Professor Mildeye is so not at all threatening, so incredibly milquetoast, so disappointingly generic, and so boring that in comparison, he makes John Goodman's Oshus P. Potter look like Darth Vader or the Joker. I mean, don't get me wrong, Goodman doesn't exactly take his role in the 97 film seriously either. But the difference is he understood the assignment and thus fully commits to the silliness and the absurdity of this material, the same exact way Glenn Close, for example, would fully commit to a certain over-the-top Disney villain role back in the 90s. With Fry, however, it almost feels like he's trying way too hard to recapture the fun magic of the Goodman performance, but sadly less successfully and less effectively. And please don't get me started on what was actually a legitimate major common complaint that I vividly remember a lot of people here in the UK having with a majority of BBC productions at the time, which is that the actors constantly mumble their lines so much that it becomes almost impossible to accurately hear the dialogue they are saying on screen. The direction by Tom Harper is cheap, generic, amateurish, and frankly non-existent. Ben Vanstone shows a completely naked misunderstanding of the original books, and that he clearly doesn't have a clue how to write a decent or good screenplay. The cinematography makes this such a dry, lifeless and drab film to look at. Even the CGI and visual effects in Doctor Who are much more professionally sophisticated and put together than the CG and visuals here, which are a complete and obvious joke. Even the score, which consists of generic Christmas pop songs, is nothing to write home about. Same goes with the costume design, actually. However, the one thing I will legit remotely say is technically impressive about this thing, which is just damning with faint praise, mind you, is the set design, especially when we go to the Borrower Underground. They at least did a remotely decent job making this miniature world consisting of just normal household items, appliances, accessories, and toys feel lived in and believable. But otherwise, it really isn't much. In conclusion, really all I have left to say about The Borrowers 2011 is that it is a complete and literal nothing burger of an adaptation that completely squanders the talents, for the most part, of everyone involved, perfectly sums up everything that's wrong with modern Hollywood remakes in general, and most egregiously completely misunderstands and or disrespects pretty much everything that made the original books as treasured, cherished, and above all timeless as they rightly are. If this was somehow your first introduction to the story of The Borrowers, and happen to like this one more than I do, then I guess more power to you. But I swear you're only doing yourselves a great disservice. Otherwise, I'd rather recommend that you skip this one. Check out the other much superior films, and or even read the original books. And with all that being said, my overall rating for The Borrowers 2011 is going to be 0.5 out of 10. Now, don't forget to do the following few things as always. Leave a comment below. Let me know your thoughts on The Borrowers 2011. Subscribe to my channel. Click on the little bell to receive any emailed notifications and or updates from the channel. If you haven't already, you can also follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Letterboxd, and Blue Sky. Do take care, everyone, and Merry Christmas.